Welcome to Essential Vibration, a space where your soul finds words that touch you deeply. If you feel the truth here, subscribe, like, and share your presence in the comments. There are moments in life when everything seems to be in the right place, but even so, something inside you insists on calling out. It's as if there were a subtle presence around you, a silent movement trying to make itself heard, but you're not sure where it's coming from. This restlessness doesn't scream, it just whispers, like a breeze that crosses your chest and leaves you with the feeling that there is something more going on than meets the eye. It is a silent, almost secret pain that does not reveal itself in an obvious way, but asks to be recognized. Braden describes this mystery as the unified field, a kind of living web that responds not only to what we think, but to what we feel and choose. Imagine an invisible, interactive organism that moves in tune with your every emotion, with every beat of your heart. This field is not just a distant theory, it is the very language of life that breathes through you. And yet we often fail to notice it. Dispenza explains that this happens because the brain filters signals according to past experiences. It interprets reality as if looking through a foggy glass, always marked by what has happened before. Thus, many messages from the universe are lost, suffocated by doubt, mistrust, and the feeling that everything is just coincidence. The mind insists on repeating old patterns, and the heart so often finds no space to be heard. This is where the analogy becomes clear. Just as a radio needs to be tuned precisely to pick up the right music, we also need to align our mind and heart to hear what the universe is trying to say. When we are out of tune, the sound is nothing more than noise, interference. But when we find the right frequency, the melody reveals itself, and in that instant, everything makes sense. And then the inevitable question arises, the question that echoes like an invitation. What if what you call coincidence is actually a dialogue you never learned to hear? Would you like me to continue now by expanding on the first sign, the symbolic repetition you chose not to see with the same deep, empathetic, and poetic tone? There are events in life that seem to have no end. Different situations, different people, different scenarios, but the feeling is always the same. It's as if you were stuck in an invisible circle, being led back to the same place, even though the paths change. It is at this point that life reveals one of its most subtle signs, symbolic repetition. Braden describes this phenomenon as the intelligence of the field seeking your attention. When the same symbol, the same experience, or even the same type of person crosses your path again, it is no coincidence. It is life trying to expand your consciousness. This continuous return is a silent language, as if the universe were writing in capital letters something you still refuse to see. Dispenza explains this cycle from a neuroscience perspective. The human mind is shaped by chemical and emotional patterns. When you relive the same emotion daily, the brain strengthens this circuit, and the body begins to live as if addicted to an emotional state. That is why you often feel like you cannot move forward. The universe repeats because your body repeats. The external experience only reflects the internal conditioning. Imagine a mirror. You can break it, you can run away from it, you can even avoid it for a while. But as long as the image inside you doesn't change, every reflection will remain the same. Life, in its silent wisdom, insists on showing you what needs to be seen until you finally allow the lesson to reveal itself. And then, a small detail awakens something different. A word that repeats itself in different conversations. A number that appears in unexpected places. An encounter that happens in unlikely circumstances. Everything seems like coincidence, but it is not. It is as if the universe has chosen to use symbols that speak directly to your soul, so that you may awaken from the pattern that keeps you trapped. Symbolic repetition is, therefore, a key that opens the door to seeing life not as chance, but as a dialogue in motion. Because every time something returns, it is not to imprison you, it is to set you free. There are moments when something happens and suddenly reality seems to reorganize itself before your eyes. It is not just the event itself, but the way it touches your consciousness, completely altering the meaning you give to the present moment. This is what differentiates a common coincidence from synchronicity. Coincidence happens and passes. It's like two lines that cross quickly, never to meet again. Synchronicity, on the other hand, remains. It stirs your perception, opens up an inner space, changes the state of your heart. It is an invisible bridge between what you feel and what the universe responds to. Gregg Braden describes these moments as micro-portals, subtle gaps in which the unified field aligns with your mind and heart. For a few seconds, everything seems to make sense. Life, which previously seemed confusing, organizes itself into a clear pattern, as if the missing piece had finally found its place. Joe Dispenza expands on this view by showing that when we experience synchronicity, our brain registers new connections. Surprise and excitement create a positive shock to the nervous system, allowing us to step out of autopilot. That's why these moments not only mark us, but also shape us. They reprogram the mind and body for new possibilities. But there is a silent caution in this process. When we try to force synchronicity, it becomes empty. When we look for signs as evidence to confirm our doubts, the field ceases to be a mirror and becomes only a projection of our fears. True synchronicity requires no effort. It comes unexpectedly, simply, naturally. Imagine life as a dance. When you try to conduct everything rigidly, you lose the rhythm. But when you relax, the music takes you where you need to be. So it is with synchronicity. It arises when you allow yourself to be led, when you make space for the universe to speak without having to shout. These moments are not just charming rarities. They are profound reminders that we are connected to something much greater. And every time we honor a synchronicity, something in us awakens to a continuous dialogue with the invisible. There are moments when life does not manifest itself in symbols or striking coincidences. The sign comes in another form, through silence. A silence that is not empty but present. It arrives like a soft, dense, almost physical weight, and suddenly you realize that something is communicating without a single word. This silence is different from the absence of ordinary sound. It alters your internal rhythm. An anxious mind, spinning in spirals of thought, calms down unexpectedly. A racing heart finds a slower, deeper rhythm. It is as if, for a moment, the universe holds your hand and says, "Here is the answer, but you will only feel it, not hear it." Gregg Braden explains that states of cardiac coherence are like tuned antennas. When we enter this state, we create conditions for subtle messages to cut through the noise of everyday life. Silence in this context is not absence, but fertile space. It is where the finest perceptions find passage. Joe Dispenza also shows us that when the body quiets down and the mind enters coherence, new connections emerge. Instead of repeating past patterns, the brain opens up to signals that would normally be discarded. It is as if the silent pause disarms the filters that keep us blind to what is before us. Think of a lake. When its waters are agitated, there is no clear reflection. But when the wind ceases and the surface calms down, the entire sky is mirrored there. So it is with silence. It creates the clarity that was missing. It reveals what was already present but hidden by excessive internal noise. There is a transformative power in simply holding this space for a few minutes. It is in this receptive state that the universe finds a way to deliver messages to us that do not come through images or words, but through sensation. It is the most intimate language of the field, one that can only be felt. Often we believe we already know how the universe's answer should come. We expect it to come in a dream, in a repeated number, in a striking phrase. We create mental frames for signs that by nature do not fit into frames. And in doing so, we become blind to everything that does not fit into what we idealize. Gregg Braden reminds us that the intelligence of the field does not operate according to our linear logic. It responds to vibration, not expectations. It is as if the universe has its own delicate language that ignores the rigid patterns of our reasoning. The more we insist that the sign must come in a specific way, the further we stray from its essence. Imagine someone who asked for clarity at a decisive moment. Every night they waited for a revealing dream, but what happened was something unexpected. Walking down the street, a stranger said a simple phrase without even imagining the impact. That was the answer. However, if the person had been stuck in the expectation of receiving it in their dreams, they might never have recognized the subtlety of the gesture. This invisible mistake is not malice. It is just the result of our attempt to control. But control blocks perception. The universe responds at frequencies broader than our minds can predict. It speaks in vivid metaphors, in unexpected movements, in everyday details that become extraordinary when viewed from another internal state. That is why letting go of form is essential. It is not about giving up on what you seek, but about releasing the anxiety about how and when the answer will come. When we stop forcing a form, the field finds a more fluid path to reach us. The answer may be in a song that suddenly plays, in the gesture of someone who crosses our path, or even in the silence that suddenly envelops our heart. The invisible mistake of rigid expectations reminds us that true attunement is not about trying to manipulate the universe to speak our language, but learning, with humility and sensitivity, to listen to its language. There is an almost inevitable impulse within us, the desire to understand everything right now. When we feel that a sign is near, anxiety grows, and we want to decipher it immediately. But this rush is treacherous. It creates turbulence in the inner field, and instead of bringing the answer closer, it pushes it further away. Gregg Braden explains that vibrational coherence is delicate. Just as the sound of an instrument can be lost amid the noise of a room, the subtle communication of the universe falls apart when we are agitated by haste. The field responds more to what we vibrate than to what we ask for. And when we vibrate despair, urgency, or impatience, the reflection we receive is more confusion. Think of a calm lake. Only when the water is still does the reflection of the sky appear clearly. But if we insist on stirring the surface, we will never see the complete image. The same is true of our mind. The more we press for the answer to come, the more we cloud the inner mirror that could reveal it. True openness happens when we replace the question, "When will the answer come?" with the gentleness of, "How can I align myself to receive it?" This simple change dissolves the anxiety of time and shifts the focus to the quality of vibration. Suddenly, it doesn't matter if the sign comes tomorrow or in a few weeks, because our inner state has already become fertile enough to recognize it when it appears. Vibrational haste is silent, because we often don't even realize it is dominating us. But every time we cultivate patience, trust, and surrender, we create space for the universe to speak in its natural language. It is in this serenity that the clearest signs reveal themselves. The dialogue with life is not made up of words, but of sensations, symbols, and internal states. Learning to understand these signs is not a gift exclusive to a few, but a skill that can be cultivated. Gregg Braden reminds us that the unified field responds to our emotions and intentions as if it were a living organism. The more awareness we put into our perception, the clearer the response we get back from the universe. Dispenza reinforces that every time we recognize a sign, we strengthen circuits in the brain that make it easier to perceive the next ones. It's like opening a trail in a forest. At first the path is difficult, but with each repeated step it becomes more evident until it turns into a safe road. Recognizing a sign is an act of training, repetition, and emotional memory. True mastery is not in collecting signs like trophies, but in cultivating an internal state that allows us to live in constant dialogue with life. This means letting go of the need for proof, abandoning haste, and making room for silent listening. The more we tune our vibration, the more natural this communication becomes. Just as learning a foreign language requires practice, patience, and attention to detail, learning the language of the universe also requires consistency and dedication. Little by little, we discover that the invisible is not a distant mystery, but an intimate companion, always ready to respond when we are willing to listen more than we speak. You have been to Essential Vibrational, where each encounter is an invitation to awakening. If this message spoke to you, leave your like, comment, and subscribe to continue walking together.